Some stories explode onto the internet with noise. Others arrive quietly and somehow stay longer. Today, Blake Shelton is all over the news for a reason that feels surprisingly simple, yet deeply powerful. It wasn't a performance, a statement, or a headline-grabbing announcement. It was one small act that created a huge impact. The moment began without warning. There were no flashing lights or staged cameras. Blake Shelton was moving through a public space, surrounded by the ordinary rhythm of people going about their day. Nothing about the setting suggested that anything memorable was about to happen. Then, something subtle shifted. A fan stood nearby, hesitant, unsure whether to step forward. That hesitation is something many people recognize, the quiet debate between admiration and fear of intrusion. Blake Shelton noticed. Instead of continuing on, he slowed down. That pause alone changed everything. He turned his attention fully toward the fan, not hurried, not distracted. There was no sense of obligation or performance. It was calm, grounded, and sincere. In that moment, the distance between celebrity and fan disappeared. Those watching sensed it instantly. Conversations faded. People stopped moving. Phones came out not out of excitement, but instinct, because something real was unfolding. The interaction itself lasted only a short time, but it carried weight. Blake Shelton listened. He acknowledged. He responded with patience and warmth. There was no rush to end the moment, no signal that time was being borrowed or wasted. In a culture where speed is everything, that slowness felt rare. Within hours, clips and images of the interaction began circulating online. The reaction was immediate. Blake Shelton's name began trending, attached not to controversy or speculation, but to words like humility, kindness, and authenticity. People didn't just watch the clip once, they replayed it. They shared it with captions that weren't sarcastic or exaggerated, but thoughtful. Many wrote that they didn't even consider themselves fans before, yet the moment moved them. What made the reaction even striking was how universal it felt. You didn't need to know Blake Shelton's music. You didn't need context. The moment spoke for itself. Comment sections filled with personal stories. People shared memories of strangers who had taken a moment to listen. Others shared experiences of being ignored and how meaningful it would have felt to be treated the way Blake Shelton treated that fan. The internet, often loud and divided, became unusually reflective. Media outlets picked up the story quickly, but the tone was different from typical celebrity coverage. Headlines focused on the simplicity of the act rather than its viral reach. Analysts noted that moments like this resonate because they offer contrast to the chaos people are used to seeing online. Blake Shelton did not comment publicly. He did not repost the clips or explain what happened. That silence became part of the story. It reinforced the idea that the moment was not intended for attention. It simply existed. For longtime fans, the moment felt familiar. Blake Shelton has often been described as approachable, grounded, and comfortable with people. This interaction aligned with that reputation rather than reshaping it. For others, it was a revelation. It challenged assumptions about fame and distance. It reminded people that public figures are still capable of genuine presence. As the day went on, Blake Shelton remained in the news cycle, not because of repetition, but because the story continued to evolve. Each share added a new layer of meaning. Each comment deepened the emotional response. The small act had grown into something larger, not because it was amplified artificially, but because people wanted to hold on to it. And as the internet continued to refresh, scroll, and move on, this story refused to disappear. As the story continued to spread, its meaning began to deepen rather than fade. This was not the kind of attention that burns bright and disappears overnight. Instead, it settled into conversations quietly, showing up in comment sections, reaction videos, and personal reflections shared by people who felt genuinely moved. What surprised many observers was how emotionally invested people became.
This was not about celebrity culture in the usual sense. It was about recognition, about what it feels like to be acknowledged in a world where most interactions feel rushed or transactional. Blake Shelton's small act became a stand-in for something people were craving without fully realizing it. Across different platforms, the tone remained unusually consistent. There was very little negativity. Instead, there was gratitude. People thanked Blake Shelton not just for the moment itself, but for what it represented. They spoke about slowing down, about listening, about choosing presence in a world that rarely pauses. Fans from different countries began sharing the clip with their own interpretations. Some said it reminded them of a parent, a teacher, or a stranger who once took time for them when they needed it most. Others said it made them reflect on how often they rush past opportunities to be kind without noticing. The media response evolved as well. Initial coverage focused on the moment itself, but later discussions examined why it resonated so deeply. Cultural commentators pointed out that during times of uncertainty and stress, people are drawn to stories that restore faith rather than provoke outrage. Industry voices quietly acknowledged how rare moments like this have become. In an era where nearly every public action is filtered through branding and messaging, authenticity stands out sharply. The fact that Blake Shelton did not frame, explain, or capitalize on the moment made it even more powerful. His silence was not empty. It was respectful. It allowed the story to remain intact, untouched by interpretation or justification. The moment belonged to the people who experienced it, both directly and through the screen. Over time, the story stopped being described as viral and started being described as meaningful. That distinction mattered. Viral moments often rely on shock or novelty. Meaningful moments rely on truth. This one endured because it felt real. The conversation also shifted inward for many viewers. People began asking themselves questions. When was the last time they truly listened to someone? When was the last time they slowed down without being forced to? The story became a quiet invitation rather than a loud statement. For Blake Shelton, the moment did not redefine his career. It didn't need to. Instead, it revealed something that had always been there. It aligned with what many already believed about him and introduced that belief to those who hadn't paid attention before. As new headlines replaced old ones, this story continued to resurface, not at the top of trending lists, but in places where it mattered more, in saved videos, in shared links, in thoughtful comments written days later. In the end, what made Blake Shelton all over the news today was not fame amplified or image curated. It was a choice, a small decision to pause, to engage, to treat someone like they mattered. That one small act created a huge impact, not because it was extraordinary, but because it was human. And in a world that often forgets the value of that, the reminder was enough to make millions stop and pay attention.